My name is Bianca, and I'm a 30-year-old physical therapist from Boston. Just moments ago, I was standing at the altar with Jacob, my fiancé of 2 years, reciting the vows we'd written together. Then my world shattered. My maid of honor and best friend of 15 years, Tara, stood up shakily and announced she was pregnant with my husband's baby. The church fell silent. I felt my knees buckle. In that moment, I had no idea that this devastating betrayal would eventually lead me to unexpected strength. Before I tell you how my perfect day turned into a nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Boston, where the row houses stood shoulder to shoulder like old friends who'd weathered decades together. My parents divorced when I was 12, and watching their marriage dissolve planted deep-rooted trust issues that followed me into adulthood. I threw myself into school and later my career as a physical therapist, helping others rebuild their strength while keeping my own heart carefully guarded. That all changed 3 years ago at a charity fundraiser for the Children's Hospital where I volunteered. The event was held in an elegant hotel ballroom with twinkling lights and the soft hum of Boston's elite mingling over champagne. I was adjusting the silent auction display when someone reached for the same item, a weekend getaway package to Cape Cod. "Looks like we have similar taste," a warm voice said. I looked up to meet the hazel eyes of Jacob Wheeler, 32, a marketing executive whose company was sponsoring the event. Tall, with neatly trimmed dark hair, and a smile that seemed to reach beyond his lips to light up his entire face, Jacob had a confidence that was magnetic without being arrogant. "I was just straightening it," I admitted. "I'm actually one of the volunteers." "Even better," he replied. Someone with a giving heart. What started as casual conversation by the auction table turned into 2 hours of talking on the terrace overlooking the city lights. Jacob was charismatic and attentive, asking thoughtful questions about my work and listening as though my answers were the most fascinating things he'd ever heard. 3 days later, he called the hospital volunteer coordinator to get my number, a move I found both bold and endearing. Our first date was dinner at a small Italian restaurant in North End, followed by a walk along the harbor. By our third date, a picnic in Boston Common, I felt myself lowering the drawbridge to my carefully guarded heart. Our relationship progressed at whirlwind speed. Weekend trips to the Berkshires, meeting each other's families at Thanksgiving, moving in together after 8 months. Jacob was everything I thought I wanted: successful, charming, and seemingly devoted. "You deserve someone who appreciates how extraordinary you are," he would say, bringing me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, or surprising me with tickets to shows I'd mentioned wanting to see. Throughout this time, my best friend Tara was a constant presence in our relationship. Tara and I had been inseparable since sophomore year of high school, when we both made the volleyball team and discovered a shared love of true crime podcasts and midnight diner runs. She was the sister I never had: wild, where I was cautious; spontaneous, where I was planned. Tara had been there through every heartbreak of my 20s. She brought ice cream and wine when my college boyfriend cheated with his study partner. She helped me move out of the apartment I shared with Mark, the pharmaceutical sales rep, who decided after 3 years that he wasn't ready for commitment. She even flew back early from a vacation in Miami when I called crying after discovering that Alan, my boss at my first physical therapy job, had a wife in the suburbs despite our 6-month relationship. "Men are temporary, but we're forever," Tara would say, her arm around my shoulders as we sat on her couch, watching bad reality TV to distract me from my latest heartache. So when Jacob proposed during a sunset walk on a beach in Maine, dropping to one knee as the sky blazed pink and orange, Tara was the first person I called after calling my parents. "It's finally happening for you, B," she squealed through the phone. "After all those frogs, you found your prince?" The question of who would be my maid of honor was never even a question. "You've been there for every disaster in my love life," I told Tara over brunch the weekend after the proposal. "I need you by my side when something finally goes right." She hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. I wouldn't be anywhere else. Looking back now, there were signs I should have seen. The way Tara's hand lingered on Jacob's arm when they hugged hello. How her laugh became slightly higher pitched when he made jokes. The fact that she started dropping by our apartment unannounced, always looking perfectly put together even for casual visits. But I was blinded by happiness and wedding planning. And maybe if I'm honest, I was also distracted by Jacob's increasingly frequent late nights at the office. His marketing firm was pitching several major clients, he explained. The promotion he was angling for would mean a significant pay increase, perfect timing as we were starting our life together. Just a few more months of crazy hours. He'd promised kissing me quickly as he grabbed his keys at 7 a.m., sometimes not returning until after I was asleep. Meanwhile, Tara had just ended a 2-year relationship with Drew, a financial analyst, who'd moved to Chicago for work. "Long distance just isn't for me," she explained, though I noticed she seemed more relieved than heartbroken. In the 3 months leading up to the wedding, Tara threw herself into maid of honor duties with unexpected enthusiasm. She organized a beautiful bridal shower at her parents' country club, arranged a surprisingly tasteful bachelorette weekend in Newport, and attended every vendor meeting and dress fitting. "You're the sister I always wanted," I told her at the final dress fitting, both of us teary-eyed as the seamstress made the last adjustments to my gown. "You're my family," she replied, squeezing my hand. "I'll always be there for you." The night before my wedding, I lay in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house following the tradition of not seeing the groom before the ceremony. Jacob had texted goodnight with a simple message, "Tomorrow you become my wife. I can't wait." I fell asleep with a smile, completely unaware that my fairy tale was built on quicksand. The morning of June 15th dawned with perfect weather, clear blue skies, and a gentle breeze, as though Boston itself was celebrating our union. My mother woke me with coffee and fresh croissants, her eyes already misty. "My only daughter getting married," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "I never thought I'd be this emotional." The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock at St. Cecilia's Church, with the reception to follow at the Harbor Hotel, a stunning venue overlooking the water. By 9, my mother and I had arrived at the hotel suite I'd booked for wedding preparations. The room was spacious with floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed everything in natural light. A champagne breakfast had been arranged by the wedding planner, fresh fruit pastries and mimosas waiting for the bridal party. "Have you heard from Tara?" I asked my mother as we unpacked my dress and accessories. The elaborate lace gown with its sweetheart neckline and cathedral train had taken months to find and required its own garment rack. "Not yet, but the bridesmaids should be arriving soon." By 10, my 3 other bridesmaids, my cousin Melissa, college roommate Jenna, and work friend Alyssa, had arrived, all excitedly chattering as they hung up their periwinkle blue dresses, but no sign of Tara. "I'll text her," Melissa offered, pulling out her phone. 10 minutes later, my phone dinged with a message from Tara. "Running late. Minor emergency. Be there by 11. Promise." "Probably a wardrobe malfunction," Jenna suggested, pouring champagne for everyone. "You know how perfectionist she gets about events." I nodded, trying to ignore a slight uneasiness. Tara was never late for important occasions. In fact, she was usually the first to arrive, taking charge and making sure everything ran smoothly. The hairstylist and makeup artist arrived, setting up their stations by the window. My mother helped me into a silk robe embroidered with bride, while the artists began transforming my bridesmaids one by one. To Bianca and Jacob, Alyssa proposed a toast, raising her mimosa. "May today be just the beginning of a lifetime of happiness." We clinked glasses and I smiled, pushing away thoughts of Tara's absence. Today was about celebration, not worry. By 11:30, my hair was being pinned into an elegant updo, adorned with small white flowers, but still no Tara. I checked my phone again, no new messages. The makeup artist was finishing with Melissa when a knock at the door made everyone turn. Tara entered looking flushed. Her normally impeccable blonde hair seemed hastily styled, and despite her bright smile, her eyes were slightly puffy as though she'd been crying. "I'm so sorry," she said, rushing over to hug me carefully, avoiding my half-done hair. "My car wouldn't start. Had to wait for a rideshare." Something in her voice sounded off, too high, too bright. But before I could ask questions, she was whisked away by the hairstylist. Throughout the next hour, I noticed Tara avoiding eye contact with me, focusing intently on her phone, or engaging the other bridesmaids in conversation whenever I approached. When our eyes did meet in the mirror as we got ready, she quickly looked away, busying herself with her makeup touch-ups. "Is everything okay?" I asked quietly, when I finally managed to get her alone while the others were helping my mother with her outfit. "Of course." Tara's voice was unnaturally cheerful. "Just wedding day jitters. Not mine, obviously." She laughed, the sound brittle. "I'm just so happy for you, Bee. You deserve all the happiness in the world." Her words should have been comforting, but something in her expression, a flicker of what looked almost like guilt, sent a chill down my spine. Before I could probe further, my father arrived. At 63, with salt and pepper hair and the same blue eyes I'd inherited, he looked distinguished in his tailored suit. His face softened when he saw me. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you look beautiful." He pulled a small blue box from his pocket. "Something borrowed and blue. Your grandmother wore these on her wedding day." Inside was a pair of sapphire earrings that caught the light. As I put them on, he took my hands in his. "Marriage isn't always easy," he said quietly. "Your mother and I may not have made it, but that doesn't mean it can't be wonderful with the right person and the right commitment. Just promise me one thing." "What's that, Dad?" "That you'll always value yourself. That you'll never let anyone diminish who you are." I hugged him, breathing in the familiar scent of his aftershave. "I promise." The time for departure arrived in a flurry of last-minute details: lipstick touches, dress, fluffing, flower pinning. In the limousine to the church, I sat between my parents, my bridesmaids following in a second car. My mother held my hand while my father stared out the window occasionally, clearing his throat to disguise his emotion. St. Cecilia's looked like a scene from a fairy tale, with white flowers adorning the historic columns and soft lighting illuminating the stained glass. The wedding coordinator ushered us to a side room while guests continued to arrive. Through the small window, I could see the church filling nearly 150 people, a mix of family, friends, and colleagues. Jacob's parents stopped by briefly before taking their seats, his mother elegant in navy blue, his father tall and serious like Jacob, but with a warmer smile. "We're so happy to welcome you to the family," his mother said, kissing my cheek. As the string quartet began playing Canon in D, the wedding coordinator lined up my bridesmaids. Tara, as maid of honor, would walk last before me. As she took her place, I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her bouquet. "Tara," I whispered, "what's wrong?" She jumped slightly, then forced a smile. "Nothing. Just remember that I love you, okay, no matter what happens." Before I could question her strange statement, the coordinator was motioning for the procession to begin. One by one, my bridesmaids disappeared down the aisle until only Tara was left. She gave me one last look, was that pity, before following. Then my father was offering his arm and we were standing at the entrance to the church. Everyone rose. The sunlight streamed through the stained glass, casting rainbow patterns across the white runner. And there at the altar stood Jacob, handsome in his black tuxedo, watching me with what I thought was love in his eyes. As my father and I began our walk, I noticed Jacob's slight pallor, the way he shifted nervously from foot to foot. I attributed it to wedding day nerves, unaware that his anxiety stemmed from something far more devastating than pre-wedding jitters. We reached the altar, my father placing my hand in Jacob's, before stepping back. Jacob's palm was clammy against mine as the minister began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The traditional words washed over me as I gazed at Jacob, the man I thought I would spend my life with. The minister led us through the opening prayers and readings, then asked us to face each other for our vows. Jacob's voice wavered slightly as he began reciting the words we'd written together. Then came the moment that would forever divide my life into before and after. "If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony," the minister intoned, "let them speak now or forever hold their peace." The traditional phrase was met with the expected silence until a movement in my peripheral vision caught my attention. Tara was standing, her bouquet clutched so tightly that petals were falling to the floor. "I'm pregnant," Tara announced, her voice cutting through the sacred silence of the church. With Jacob's baby. The words hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. I stood frozen, my mind unable to process what I'd just heard. The church, packed with our closest friends and family, fell into a stunned silence before erupting into gasps and murmurs. I turned to Jacob, desperately searching his face for denial, for outrage, for anything that would tell me this was some cruel joke or terrible mistake. But the color had drained from his face, his eyes wide with panic and, most devastatingly, recognition. In that moment, without a word, he confirmed everything. Bianca, I'm so sorry, Tara continued, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't let you marry him without knowing the truth. We've been seeing each other for months. The baby, I'm 3 months along. My ears began to ring. The church, the people, even the ornate ceiling above seemed to be spinning. I felt as though I were watching the scene from outside my body, the beautiful bride in her white dress, facing the ultimate betrayal from the two people she trusted most. Is it true? I finally managed to whisper to Jacob, though I already knew the answer. He couldn't meet my eyes. Bianca, His voice cracked. It just happened. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything. Tara's voice rose an octave. You told me you loved me. You said you were going to break off the engagement. The guests' murmurs grew louder. I heard my mother's voice somewhere behind me, then felt her hand on my arm. My father had moved from his front row seat and was now standing beside me, his arm around my shoulders as my knees threatened to give way. How long? I asked, my voice sounding strange and distant even to my own ears. How long has this been going on? Jacob ran a hand through his carefully styled hair. It was just a few times. A mistake. I was stressed about work, about the wedding. 7 months. Tara interrupted, her face blotchy with tears. Since your birthday party at our apartment. You were working late, and Jacob came by to pick up the gift we'd gone in on together. 7 months. While I'd been tasting cakes and choosing floral arrangements, my fiancé and best friend had been betraying me in the most fundamental way possible. My brother Alex had pushed past several guests and now stood confronting Jacob. You son of a bitch, he growled. Fists clenched at his sides. The wedding planner, a petite woman named Cassandra, who until now had managed everything with military precision, was trying unsuccessfully to usher guests outside. Perhaps we could give the family some privacy, she suggested, her professional demeanor cracking slightly in the face of this unexpected disaster. I have the text messages, Tara said, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. I can show you. Don't, my mother said sharply. Bianca doesn't need to see that. Not here. But I held out my hand. Show me. Tara hesitated, then handed over her phone. I scrolled through message after message, the evidence of their betrayal laid bare on the screen. Sweet nothings. Plans to meet. Discussions about their future. In one particularly painful exchange from just 3 weeks ago, Jacob had written, after the honeymoon, I'll figure out how to end things with B. We'll be together properly then. The cold calculation of it, planning to marry me while already planning to leave me, made bile rise in my throat. You were going to let me marry you, I asked Jacob, my voice rising, knowing you were having a baby with my best friend. Jacob took a step toward me, his hand outstretched. Bianca, please. We can talk about this privately. My father and brother moved between us like a shield. You don't get to speak to her, my father said, his voice low but menacing. Tara was still standing in her place in the bridal party line, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I couldn't let you go through with it, she said. I kept waiting for him to tell you, but yesterday he said he was still going through with the wedding. I couldn't let you marry him without knowing. So this was your solution. I finally found my voice, anger beginning to cut through the shock. Not to tell me privately, not to come to me as my supposed best friend, but to announce it in front of everyone I know, to humiliate me on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Tara flinched. I tried to talk to you this morning. I couldn't find the words. I remembered her late arrival, her strange behavior, the tears in her eyes. All this time I'd thought she was emotional about my wedding. Instead, she'd been working up the courage to destroy it. Jacob made another attempt to approach me. Bianca, baby, please. We can work through this. It was just a physical thing, it didn't mean. I'm carrying your child, Tara cried. You said you loved me. I'd heard enough. Without conscious thought, I was moving, gathering my heavy skirts in my hands, and pushing past Jacob, past Tara, past the stunned minister who stood helplessly at the altar. I heard my name called from several directions but didn't stop. I fled down the aisle past rows of shocked faces, cousins I hadn't seen in years, Jacob's colleagues I'd met only at engagement parties, friends who had traveled from across the country to witness our union. Each face a new humiliation, each gasp another wound. As I burst through the heavy church doors into the bright June sunshine, the disconnect between the beautiful day and the nightmare unfolding seemed like a cruel joke. The wedding photographer positioned to capture our exit as newlyweds lowered his camera in confusion. I didn't stop running until I reached the bridal limo still parked outside the driver, leaning against it while smoking a cigarette. He straightened quickly when he saw me. Back to the hotel, I managed to say before collapsing into the back seat, my elaborate dress billowing around me. As the car pulled away from the church, I caught a glimpse of Jacob running out the doors calling my name. But it was too late. Not just for this moment, but for everything we had been, everything we might have been. In the space of 5 minutes, my entire future had been erased and rewritten without my consent. The only clear thought I had as the limo navigated Boston's streets was that nothing would ever be the same again. The life I had planned, the family I had imagined, the trust I had given so completely, all of it was shattered beyond repair. I barricaded myself in the bridal suite at the Harbor Hotel, the room where just hours earlier I had been joyfully preparing for what I thought would be the happiest day of my life. Now it felt like a museum of broken dreams, my veil draped over a chair, scattered bobby pins on the vanity champagne glasses still half full. 3 of my closest friends had followed me back to the hotel, Jenna, Alyssa, and my cousin Melissa. They sat with me in stunned silence, none of us quite able to process what had just happened. Do you want me to get you some water? Something stronger? Jenna finally asked, her hand resting gently on my back as I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my wedding dress. I shook my head, unable to form words. My phone was buzzing incessantly in the small purse Melissa had thought to grab for me. When I couldn't bear the sound anymore, I pulled it out to turn it off and saw the flood of messages. From relatives. Are you okay? What happened? We're here for you. From friends. I can't believe this. Do you need anything? Call me. And from Jacob, a stream of increasingly desperate texts. Bianca, please talk to me. It's not what you think. I made a terrible mistake. I love you, not her. Please give me a chance to explain. I'm coming to the hotel. The last message made me look up in alarm. He's coming here, I said, my voice hoarse. Alyssa immediately moved to the door. I'll tell the front desk not to let him up. I'll call your brother, Melissa added, already dialing. Jenna sat beside me, gently taking the phone from my trembling hands. You don't need to read any more of these right now. A knock at the door made us all freeze before Alyssa cautiously checked the peephole. It's your mom, she said with relief, opening the door. My mother entered looking both devastated and furious. She had always been the calm one in our family, the mediator, but now her eyes blazed with a protective rage I'd rarely seen. I've spoken to the venue manager, she said, all business despite her obvious emotion. They're sending the guests home. The caterers will package up the food for donation. She sat on my other side. Your father is handling Jacob. That almost made me smile, my gentle academic father handling the situation. But I knew beneath his professorial exterior was a fierce protector who was undoubtedly as angry as I'd ever seen him. Tara's sister came to find me. My mother continued, her voice softening. She wants you to know how sorry she is. Apparently Tara has been unstable since her breakup with Drew. Her sister thinks she's been obsessed with Jacob, with having what you have. What I had, I corrected bitterly. My mother squeezed my hand. Yes, what you had. As the afternoon wore on, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Friends called with information they'd been too afraid to share before sightings of Jacob and Tara together. When I thought he was working late, whispered conversations that stopped when others approached Tara's increasing comments about Jacob's positive qualities. I saw them having coffee together about a month ago, Alyssa admitted, looking guilty. When they saw me, they said they were planning a surprise for your honeymoon. I believed them. 2 weeks ago at the Thompson work party, they were in a corner talking intensely, Jenna added. I thought maybe they were arguing about wedding details. Each revelation was a fresh cut. How had I been so blind? Had I been so desperate for my happy ending that I'd ignored all the warning signs? The physical and emotional exhaustion eventually caught up with me. After crying until I had no tears left, I sat in numb silence while Melissa and Jenna carefully helped me out of my wedding dress. The act of removing it, this beautiful gown I'd chosen with such hope, felt like the final acknowledgement that the future I'd planned was gone. My mother arranged for my brother Alex to go to the apartment I shared with Jacob to collect essential items I would need for the next few days. You'll stay with us tonight, she said in a tone that brooked no argument. By early evening, I felt strong enough to leave the hotel. As our small group headed for the elevators, Melissa gasped. Jacob's in the lobby. Sure enough, through the glass doors of the elevator, I could see him pacing near the reception desk, still in his wedding suit, though now disheveled his tie. Gone hair mussed as though he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. We can go out the service entrance, Jenna suggested. No, the word came out stronger than I expected. I'm not sneaking out of my own wedding venue. When the elevator doors opened, Jacob immediately rushed toward me, stopping short when my friends formed a protective circle. Bianca, please, he said, his eyes red-rimmed. Just 5 minutes. I looked at him, and felt a strange calm settle over me. Were you ever going to tell me, or were you just going to marry me while your child grew inside my best friend? He flinched. It's complicated. Tara threatened to tell you if I broke things off with her. She said she'd announce it at the wedding if I tried to end it. So you were trapped. I laughed bitterly. The victim in all this, no I. You could have come to me any time in the last 7 months, Jacob. Before the invitations went out. Before the final vendor payments. Before I walked down that aisle believing I was marrying someone who loved me. I do love you, he insisted, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. No, you don't know what love is. Neither does Tara. Love isn't something you betray for a cheap thrill. It isn't something you use to manipulate and control. My mother touched my elbow. The car's waiting, sweetheart. I nodded, then turned back to Jacob one last time. Don't contact me again. My brother will arrange a time to get the rest of my things. As we walked out of the hotel, I heard him call my name once more, but I didn't turn around. In the car, I leaned my head against the cool window and closed my eyes, wondering how I would ever put the pieces of my life back together. That night I checked into a different hotel, not the one where my parents were staying, not anywhere Jacob would think to look. I needed to be alone with my thoughts. In a generic hotel room, wearing pajamas my brother had grabbed from our apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed that should have been my wedding night bed and tried to comprehend how thoroughly my life had changed in a single day. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, showed 73 missed calls and over 100 text messages. I couldn't face any of them. Instead, I ordered room service I couldn't eat and stared at the television without registering what was playing. As midnight approached, the time when in another life I might have been dancing with my new husband under twinkling lights, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge the truth. The worst day of my life had just ended, but the pain was only beginning. The weeks following what should have been my wedding day blurred together in a haze of grief, anger, and practical necessities. I moved back in with my parents, temporarily sleeping in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by remnants of a simpler time high school trophies, college pennants, and photos of a younger me who had no idea how deeply life could wound. My mother handled most of the logistics of the wedding aftermath, canceling the honeymoon to Greece, arranging for gifts to be returned with carefully worded notes, fielding calls from concerned relatives. My father, meanwhile, became my silent protector, driving me to appointments and sitting nearby reading when I couldn't bear to be alone but couldn't handle conversation. The public humiliation was its own special kind of torture. I deactivated all my social media accounts after seeing speculation and gossip from people on the fringes of our social circle. Despite this news traveled in the way it always does in connected communities, through whispers, text messages, and concerned check-ins that felt more like prying. Did you hear about Bianca's wedding? Her maid of honor was pregnant with the groom's baby. I imagined these conversations happening in coffee shops, at gym classes, during dinner parties, my private heartbreak served up as the latest juicy story. Friends and family formed a protective barrier around me. My brother Alex had moved most of my belongings from the apartment I'd shared with Jacob, setting them up in my parents' garage until I could figure out next steps. My boss at the physical therapy clinic gave me a month of paid leave, no questions asked. College friends I hadn't seen in years sent care packages and offers of getaway weekends. Jacob's attempts to contact me continued with decreasing frequency. After I blocked his number, he resorted to emails, handwritten letters, even messages delivered through mutual friends. He says he made the biggest mistake of his life, reported David, a friend from our regular trivia night group, who had unwillingly become Jacob's messenger. He says Tara manipulated him, that the pregnancy was an accident, that he wants to make it right. There is no making this right, I told David flatly. And if you value our friendship, don't mention his name to me again. 2 weeks after the non-wedding, I discovered that Jacob's betrayal went beyond the affair. Going through financial documents for the apartment lease, I found evidence that he had been siphoning money from our joint savings account, small amounts at first, then larger withdrawals in the months leading up to the wedding. My father helped me track the transactions, revealing nearly $12,000 missing over 6 months. When confronted via my lawyer, Jacob claimed the money had gone toward wedding expenses, but couldn't provide receipts. We later discovered he had opened a separate credit card I knew nothing about, with charges for jewelry, weekend getaways, and dinners at restaurants we had never visited together. Classic signs of a double life, my lawyer said matter-of-factly, as though discussing a routine case rather than the unraveling of my reality. The financial betrayal led me to dig deeper, and what I found suggested that Tara might not have been Jacob's only affair. There were text messages with a coworker named Danielle that crossed professional boundaries. Hotel charges in towns where he claimed to be on business trips alone. A pattern of lies so extensive that I began to question whether anything in our relationship had been real. As for Tara, her initial attempts to contact me were almost as persistent as Jacob's. Her texts ranged from tearful apologies to bizarre justifications. "I never meant to hurt you," one message read, "but when love happens, you can't control it." "I thought you should know the truth before you married him," said another. "In a way, I saved you from a worse heartbreak later." The audacity of her to position herself as my savior, as though the public humiliation had been an act of friendship rather than the final betrayal in a long line of deceptions, made me physically ill. Through mutual friends, I learned that Jacob had initially moved in with Tara after the wedding disaster, but had relocated to a hotel after less than 2 weeks. Apparently, their relationship was already showing cracks without the thrill of secrecy to sustain it. 4 weeks after what should have been my wedding day, I was sitting in Dr. Harper's office, the therapist my primary care doctor had recommended when I showed signs of anxiety and depression. "Betrayal trauma," she explained gently during our second session, "is particularly severe because it undermines your basic understanding of reality. The people you trusted most were presenting one version of reality while living another." I nodded, the clinical framing somehow making the chaos more manageable. "I keep trying to figure out when it started, if there were signs I missed." "That's a common response," she said. "But I want you to consider that their choices reflect their character, not your perception." Those sessions became anchors in weeks that otherwise felt untethered from normal time. I would sit in her calm, neutral office with its soft lighting and talk through the anger, the humiliation, the fear that I would never trust anyone again. 6 weeks post-wedding, I was picking up coffee at a small cafe near my parents' house when I saw them, Jacob and Tara, sitting at a corner table, his hand resting on hers. They hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment I observed them from a strange distance as though watching characters in a film rather than the two people who had shattered my life. They looked happy, casual, normal, as though their relationship hadn't been built on the ruins of mine. Tara was wearing a flowy top that didn't yet reveal her pregnancy, but her free hand rested protectively on her abdomen in that instinctive gesture of expectant mothers. I left without ordering, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get my car door open. The sight of them together in the daylight in public brought a fresh wave of pain I hadn't been prepared for. That night I researched job opportunities in other cities. Chicago, Denver, Seattle. Places where I could start fresh, where no one would know me as the bride whose maid of honor was pregnant with the groom's baby. The idea of leaving Boston, the only home I'd ever known, felt simultaneously terrifying and freeing. I was lost in apartment listings when my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Bianca, it's Heather, Jacob's sister." I nearly hung up, but curiosity kept me on the line. Heather and I had always gotten along well. She'd even helped me select my wedding dress. "I know you probably don't want to hear from anyone connected to Jacob," she continued when I didn't respond, "but I wanted you to know that I'm disgusted by what he did. Our whole family is." Her words loosened something in my chest. "Thank you for saying that. He's always been selfish, but this," she sighed. "Mom and Dad barely speak to him now. Dad says he didn't raise his son to be this kind of man." We talked for nearly an hour. Heather told me that Jacob's parents had refused to meet Tara, that his nieces and nephews asked why Uncle Jacob had made Miss Bianca sad. These small acts of loyalty from the family I'd almost joined offered a strange comfort. Before hanging up, Heather said something that would stay with me. "You know, Bianca, sometimes the most painful endings make way for the most authentic beginnings. I think you're going to be okay, more than okay, without my brother in your life." That night I deleted the apartment listings from other cities. Running away wouldn't solve anything. This was my home, my community, my life. Jacob and Tara had taken enough from me. I wouldn't let them take my sense of belonging too. As I lay in bed, I realized I'd spent weeks letting their betrayal define my existence. Every decision, every emotion, every interaction had been colored by what they had done. I'd been living in reaction to their choices, rather than making my own. In that moment, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck on my bedroom ceiling as a teenager, I made a decision this would be the lowest point. From here I would rebuild not the life I'd planned to have with Jacob, but something new, something entirely mine. 2 months after my wedding, I was sitting in a cafe when I heard someone call my name. I looked up to see Elena, a former patient I'd helped recover from a serious skiing accident the previous year. "Bianca, I've been hoping to run into you," she said, sliding into the chair across from me without waiting for an invitation. Elena had always been like that, direct, unapologetically taking up space in a way I'd both admired and found slightly overwhelming during her physical therapy. "How's the knee?" I asked, grateful for the distraction from the brief I'd been reading about selling the apartment Jacob and I had bought together. "Strong as ever, thanks to you." She studied me for a moment, her head tilted. "I heard about what happened with your wedding." I stiffened, preparing for the awkward sympathy or worse, prying questions that usually followed this acknowledgement. Instead, Elena said, "Something similar happened to me, 5 years ago. My fiancé and my business partner." "I didn't know," I said, genuinely surprised. She shrugged. "I don't lead with it in conversations anymore. But back then I thought I'd never recover. I actually moved to Sedona for a year, did the whole eat, pray, love thing." She laughed. "Complete with inappropriate rebound relationship with a yoga instructor." Despite myself, I smiled. "Did it help?" "The yoga instructor, God, no. But the perspective did." She leaned forward. "Here's what I realized, Bianca. Every day I spent obsessing over their betrayal was another day I gave them power over my life." Her words echoed what I'd been thinking that night in my childhood bedroom. The idea that my reaction to their betrayal was the one thing I could control. "How did you stop?" I asked. "Giving them that power?" I decided to live a life so authentically mine that when I looked back, their chapter would seem like a footnote rather than the whole story. She glanced at her watch. I've got to run, but let's have dinner soon. I'll tell you all about the terrible poetry I wrote during that phase. She scribbled her number on a napkin and was gone in a whirlwind of energy, leaving me sitting there with a strange feeling blooming in my chest. It took me a moment to recognize it as hope. That evening, I called a lawyer who specialized in real estate and finances. I need to ensure a clean break, I explained. Financially, legally, in every way possible. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Rita Patel, helped me navigate the untangling of the life I'd been building with Jacob. The apartment would be sold, our assets divided. The remainder of my belongings would be collected by a moving service, eliminating any need for me to see Jacob again. What about the engagement ring? Rita asked during our second meeting. The 2-carat diamond in its platinum setting had been sitting in my dresser drawer since the wedding day. It was a gift, I said slowly. Legally, I can keep it. Yes, Rita agreed, though some people prefer to return them. I thought about it overnight and made my decision. The ring was sold through a reputable jeweler, fetching nearly $15,000. Half went into a retirement account Rita helped me set up. The other half funded a 2-week solo trip to Portugal, a country I'd always wanted to visit, but Jacob had dismissed as not worth the flight time. Before departing for my trip, I had one last piece of business to attend to. I returned to the apartment Jacob and I had shared to collect the last few personal items. The moving service had missed old journals, photo albums from before our relationship, a painting my grandmother had left me. Jacob wasn't supposed to be there. We'd coordinated through our lawyers to avoid any contact. But as I used my key for what would be the final time, I heard movement in the bedroom. He appeared in the doorway looking startled, and I noted with detached interest significantly worse for wear. His normally perfectly styled hair was overgrown, his designer clothes replaced by a worn t-shirt and sweatpants. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Bianca," he said, his voice catching. "I didn't know you were coming." "Clearly," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I told your lawyer I'd be here at 2. He ran a hand through his hair. "Right, I forgot. It's been a rough time." I almost laughed at the audacity. "Has it? Tara and it's not working out," he admitted. "She's not who I thought she was." "Funny how that works," I said, moving past him to collect the journals I'd come for. "People showing their true colors eventually." He followed me to the bookshelf. "I found your journal," he said, picking up a leather-bound book I'd written in during our early relationship. "I've been reading it, remembering how good we were together." The invasion of privacy didn't even surprise me anymore. "Put it down. It doesn't belong to you." "Neither does Tara," he said quietly. "I made a terrible mistake, Bianca. The worst of my life. But it made me realize what I really want, who I really love." I took the journal from his hands, adding it to the small box I'd brought. "You don't love me, Jacob. You never did. You loved how I made you feel about yourself. You loved having someone who trusted you completely while you lied to her face. You loved the image of us more than the reality." "That's not true," he protested, reaching for my arm. "We can start over. Couples have survived worse." I stepped back. "We're not a couple. We haven't been since the moment you decided to sleep with my best friend. It was a mistake, a stupid, meaningless. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something thoughtless when you're tired." I cut him off. "What you did was a choice. A series of choices made day after day for months." He sat heavily on the edge of the bed we'd once shared. "She's keeping the baby," he said, staring at the floor. "But she doesn't want me involved. Says I'm too selfish to be a father." "Smart woman," I remarked, surprised to find I felt no satisfaction in their relationship's implosion. "At least she figured that out before marrying you." As I gathered the last of my belongings, Jacob made one final plea. "I never deserved you," he said, his voice breaking. "But I still love you." I paused at the door, looking back at him. "You know what's strange? I believe that you think that's true. But love isn't something you feel. It's something you do. And you never loved me by that definition. Walking out of that apartment for the last time, I felt no closure that tidy concept sold by self-help books and romantic comedies. What I felt instead was liberation. I was free of Jacob's lies, free of the relationship I'd invested so much in, free to create a life entirely of my own choosing. The next morning, I boarded a plane to Lisbon with a single suitcase and no expectations beyond experiencing something new. For the first time since I could remember, I had no one to answer to, no one to consider but myself. In Portugal, surrounded by the colorful buildings of Porto, the ancient streets of Lisbon, and the rugged coastline of the Algarve, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been submerged in my relationship with Jacob. I sketched in cafes, something I hadn't done since college. I joined walking tours and made conversation with strangers. I ate meals alone without checking my phone. One evening, sitting on a seawall watching the sunset, I realized I'd gone an entire day without thinking about Jacob or Tara. The realization didn't trigger guilt or pain, just a quiet acknowledgement that healing was happening in its own unpredictable way. When I returned to Boston, I moved into a small but sunny apartment in Jamaica Plain, a neighborhood I'd always loved, but Jacob had dismissed as too bohemian. I painted the walls yellow, adopted a cat from the shelter, and joined a rock-climbing gym, something I'd wanted to try for years. At work, I threw myself into new projects, eventually specializing in trauma recovery cases, patients whose bodies needed to heal from sudden, unexpected injuries. My own experience with emotional trauma gave me a deeper empathy for their adjustment process. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones through the climbing gym and a book club at the local library. Slowly, my social circle rebuilt itself, this time centered entirely around my own interests, rather than Jacob's preferences or our identity as a couple. One Tuesday evening, 4 months after my return from Portugal, I received a text from Josh, a fellow physical therapist I'd known for years, but never been particularly close to. "Heard you're into climbing now. A few of us go to the quarry on Saturdays if you ever want to join." That simple invitation led to a new friendship, then eventually to cautious dating, both of us aware of my recent history, both of us taking things at a deliberately slow pace. Josh was different from Jacob in every way, thoughtful rather than charming, genuine rather than performative, consistent rather than exciting. When he asked about what happened with my wedding, I was able to tell the story without my voice shaking, without the pain feeling fresh. It was becoming what Elena had predicted, a chapter, rather than the whole story. 6 months after what would have been my wedding day, I stood in my new apartment surrounded by evidence of the life I'd rebuilt. The walls were painted colors I'd chosen, decorated with art that spoke to me, rather than matched a carefully curated aesthetic. Mismatched furniture that prioritized comfort over style. Books I actually read rather than displayed for guests' approval. My phone buzzed with a notification. A social media alert about Tara. We weren't connected anymore, but mutual friends still created digital proximity. She had given birth to a baby boy. There was no mention of Jacob in the post. I stared at the notification, waiting for the wave of pain or anger, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange sense of disconnection, as though I was reading about characters in a novel rather than people who had once been central to my life. Jacob's mother had reached out to me a month earlier. We'd met for coffee in a neutral location, both of us slightly awkward, but determined to maintain the connection we'd formed. "He's barely involved," she'd told me, not needing to specify who or what she was referring to. "Sees the baby once a week, if that. Tara's parents are helping her." She'd hesitated before adding, "I wish things had turned out differently, Bianca. You would have been a wonderful addition to our family." I'd squeezed her hand in response, finding I could be grateful for her kindness without dwelling on what might have been. Now, looking at the notification about Tara's baby, I made a decision. I deleted the alert without opening it, then went through my settings and muted all updates related to both Jacob and Tara. Their lives would continue without my attention or energy. That evening, I attended a women's support group I joined a few months after the wedding disaster. Originally focused on recovering from relationship betrayal, it had evolved into a circle of women supporting each other through all kinds of life transitions. I have news. I told the group once we'd all settled in the community center's meeting room. I've been offered a partnership at the clinic. Congratulations flowed around the circle, genuine and warm. That's not all, I continued. I'm starting a specialized program for patients dealing with trauma, physical and emotional, using PT as a gateway to holistic recovery. Morgan, a divorce attorney whose husband had left her for his 23-year-old assistant, leaned forward. That's amazing, Bianca. Using your experience to help others. It feels right, I admitted. For the first time in a long time, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. After the meeting, Kelly, who had joined the group just 2 weeks earlier, approached me. Her situation was painfully familiar. She'd discovered her fiancé's affair 3 days before their wedding. "How did you do it?" she asked, her eyes still carrying that shell-shocked look I remembered from my own mirror. "How did you rebuild?" I considered her question carefully. "One day at a time," I said finally. And by realizing that what happened to me wasn't a reflection of my worth, but of their character. "I'm afraid I'll never trust anyone again," she admitted. "I thought that too," I told her. "But what I've learned is that trust isn't something you give blindly. It's something that's earned over time through consistent actions. The right people will understand that and be patient with the process." As I drove home that night, I reflected on how far I'd come. The raw, bleeding wound of betrayal had slowly transformed into a scar still visible, still part of me, but no longer painful to the touch. The experience had changed me certainly, but not in the ways I'd initially feared. I'd worried I would become bitter, closed off, perpetually suspicious. Instead, I'd developed a deeper understanding of my own resilience, a clearer sense of my boundaries, and a more authentic approach to relationships of all kinds. The wedding video I never received had become a metaphor in my mind for the life I'd narrowly escaped, a perfectly choreographed performance that would have masked profound unhappiness. The catastrophe at the altar, as painful as it was, had freed me from a future built on deception. 2 years ago, if someone had described my current life to me, single, living alone, focused primarily on career and friendships, I might have seen it as a consolation prize, a lesser alternative to marriage and family. Now I recognized it as a life rich with possibilities, authentically chosen, rather than prescribed by social expectations. That's not to say I'd sworn off love or partnership. My relationship with Josh was progressing at its own careful pace, both of us aware of the work required to build something genuine. But whether that relationship evolved into a lifelong commitment or eventually ran its course, I knew. I would be okay either way. The final piece of my healing came unexpectedly during a routine clearing out of old emails. I found a draft I'd written to Tara the day after the wedding, but never sent a furious, pain-filled missive detailing every way she'd betrayed me every moment of our friendship that now felt tainted by her deception. Reading it now, I felt compassion for the wounded woman who'd written those words, but I no longer shared her consuming anger. In a moment of clarity, I deleted the draft permanently. Forgiveness, I'd discovered, wasn't about excusing their actions or welcoming them back into my life. It was about releasing the hold their betrayal had on my present and future. It was a gift I gave myself, not them. As I got ready for bed that night, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, hair shorter than I'd worn it during my relationship with Jacob, cheeks flushed with health, eyes clear and focused. I barely recognized the desperate woman in the wedding dress who had fled down the aisle 6 months earlier. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and far more self-possessed. Someone who understood that while she couldn't control what happened to her, she had complete authority over how she responded. Someone who had learned that the most profound act of self-respect sometimes looks like walking away. The worst day of my life had paradoxically set me on the path to the most authentic version of myself. Not despite the pain, but because of how I'd moved through it with dignity, with courage, and ultimately with hope. So if you're watching this and facing your own moment of devastating betrayal, know this: the story doesn't end when the relationship does. The most important chapters may still be unwritten, waiting for you to find the strength to turn the page. Have you ever had to completely rebuild your life after betrayal? Share your experience in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more journeys of resilience and recovery. And remember, sometimes the most painful endings clear the way for the most authentic beginnings. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength on your own journey of healing.